What's some of the stuff you see as far as like, I know you get to see investors' financials all the
Mhm.
time. So, what's some of the stuff that you would say that you would give advice or help for someone that's like, hey, this is what you need to do, or this is like a common mistake that you see a lot where you're like, man, these guys do this and it just makes it so hard for me to even help them. Like,
Yeah. S To boil it down, it's self-employment, the
yeah,
self-employment part of it. I think a lot of people are very kinda apprehensive and ignorant's a bad word because it sounds like it's bad. They just lack the information, and they don't go and search it out when it comes to taxes. Some people try to cut corners and don't use a CPA, or they use their, cousin who's a CPA thinking they're getting a good deal, and it's like, well, yeah, you're not paying a lot, but you're really not getting the real advice that you need.
right.
And that's, I think, where people try to cut corners. And I tell people all the time, like, get a CPA. If you are self-employed and you're not spending time and investing time in learning how to do your taxes, do not do your taxes
Hmm.
because it can be a lot of repercussions. Obviously, we just hired, was it 85,000 auditors or something with the IRS? Like, if you're not doing your stuff right, you're going to get caught. The government's
Yeah.
not super good at a lot of things, but they're pretty good about getting their money when it's owed to them.
Yeah.
And they will get it from you.
Yeah.
So when I see self-employed people, if they're using a CPA, a lot of things that I do with a lot of my clients is say, hey, when you get your draft taxes, send them to me because I'm going to look through them and say, I'll give you a good example. Turn of this year, that was probably like May or June. So after they extended, I got the taxes and they were expensing a ton of stuff. That's usually a big thing is that
Hmm.
people think, oh, I'm 1099 now. I'm going to expense everything under the moon. And what they don't realize is it's a double-edged sword. Yeah, they're not having to pay the government a lot of money, but on the same token, they're also telling the government, I didn't make a lot of money. Well, when you go to qualify for a loan,
Right.
they're going to be like, well, you didn't make a lot of money. And oftentimes they'll say, well, no, look at my gross. And I'm like, well, look at your net. Like, this is
Right.
what you did. And oftentimes, CPAs, I know a number of them, they they have a lot of volume. Unless you are a CPA who's working with like a big firm and you have a big contract, you're usually doing a lot of, if you're in the tax return world, you're doing a lot of returns. You don't have time typically to just really delve in and find out, hey, Chris, what are your goals next year? Oh, you want to buy 3 rental houses? Okay, let's pump the brakes on some of these expenses and drop. Those conversations don't happen a lot.
Right.
Mhm.
The CPAs that do are few and far between, and they're awesome. Those are
Mhm.
the CPAs you hold on to for life. You don't want them to get too busy.
They're
Yeah.
not taking on more clients.
No, those are the ones you want. But the thing is they don't ask the CPAs don't ask the questions, and the borrowers don't know to ask the questions, and they're just like, oh, well, I don't want to pay a lot of taxes. So what I try to do is say, hey, give me a copy of your tax returns. Let me look at them. And on this particular one that we did earlier this year, he had gotten a vehicle and they expensed it, just full on expensed it because it was a heavy, whatever, one of the farm vehicle code or
Yeah.
whatever it was,
Over.
expensed the whole thing. And we got the CPA on the phone and the borrower, and I basically was like, hey, if you expense this whole thing, he will not qualify. And he's in a position where he's using 2 years of tax returns. So it's actually going to affect him for not just this year, but the subsequent year.
Hmm.
So I said, hey, is there a world where we can depreciate this instead? And the CPA was like, yeah, that shouldn't be a problem at all. Depreciated it. And the difference is when I qualify someone, I can add depreciation back in and it doesn't hurt them.
Mm.
Whereas an expense, you can't. Your hands are kind of tied, at least when it comes to something like that.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I see a lot where it's like, if I can review the taxes and give you any sort of insight, or again, if you have rentals and some of these investors have multiple rentals, I like to look at them and say, hey, sometimes it's glaring. Like, why didn't you write off insurance on any of these properties?
Hmm.
And they don't have they don't know. And they go back to the CPA and they're like, oh yeah, I guess we missed it. And it's like, okay, we can amend them, which is going to cost money, take time, do all this other kind of stuff. Or, hey, let's catch it on the next time. Well, that's great, but it didn't help. It hurt
Yeah.
the tax person. So a lot of people I work with, they're like, well, he's already seen all my stuff, right? It's like,
Yeah,
I've already
yeah.
seen him with the pants down. It's like,
Yeah.
let's just keep showing them. So it doesn't, usually they're pretty cool with like, oh yeah, take a look at my taxes again. You've already seen everything. And it's kind of nice to have a second opinion from someone who's not in it and I'm not getting paid to look at them. I'm just looking at it and like, hey, they just missed this. You
Yeah.
make sure you ask your CPA about this or ask them about that. And that's been probably a really big thing that I think has helped set some of these investors I work with